Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. The studio lights were bright, the cameras rolling, but she was steady. In the wake of Donald Trump's explosive and demeaning post about her, one filled with dog whistles, condescension, and an unmistakable undertone of racial animosity, most expected her to avoid confrontation. Maybe pivot, maybe deflect, but not her. Asterisk, as the host hesitated, unsure how to even introduce the subject tactfully, Jasmine leaned forward. "Let me save you the trouble," she said plainly. "Let's talk about the post." Asterisk, it was a moment that caught everyone off guard. The anchor froze. The production team behind the camera exchanged glances. This wasn't in the rundown. No prepared questions. No buffer. Asterisk, Crockett pulled out her phone and read Trump's post aloud, word for word, without changing a syllable. His words, once confined to Truth, Social, and the echo chambers of fringe supporters, were suddenly being repeated on national television. And not just repeated, but examined, exposed, dissected. Asterisk, when she finished reading, she looked straight into the camera and said, "This is the man asking Americans to trust him again with power. And this is how he speaks about a sitting member of Congress and elected official doing her job. If this is how he treats women who challenge him publicly, imagine how he treats people behind closed doors." But she didn't stop there. Crockett turned her attention to those who had remained silent. "I want to know where the rest of the GOP is right now. Where are the reasonable conservatives? Where are the so-called moderates? If you see this and you say nothing, then you are just as responsible. Silence doesn't protect democracy, it protects bullies." Asterisk, it was a direct shot, and it landed hard. Many in Washington had grown used to shrugging off Trump's behavior, treating it as just another day in the political circus. But Crockett wasn't playing along. She wasn't just challenging Trump. She was challenging the infrastructure that allowed men like him to dominate political discourse without consequence. Asterisk, this isn't about me being offended, she said. "I'm not here for a pity party. I'm here because people need to understand that when someone like Donald Trump talks like this, and no one pushes back, it sets the standard. It tells young girls watching this that they should just take it. It tells women in office that we are fair game for ridicule if we dare to speak boldly. It tells men that this behavior is acceptable if you're rich or powerful enough." Asterisk, the tone was calm but piercing. There was no yelling, no dramatics, just the cold truth, laid out in full view. And that made it all the more uncomfortable. For those who preferred to look the other way, asterisk, even more striking was her willingness to name names. We saw Kevin McCarthy race to defend Trump when he was indicted. We saw Jim Jordan twisting himself into knots to discredit investigations. But when this man attacks women, when he mocks veterans, when he threatens judges, where's the outrage then? Asterisk, she paused, letting the questions sit in the air like smoke after a firecracker. Asterisk, leadership isn't just about passing bills. It's about standing up when it matters. And if the Republican Party wants to be taken seriously, then it's time they start cleaning their own house. Because the man they're aligning with has made it clear he doesn't care about decency. He cares about power, and he will tear down anyone who stands in his way. Even if it's a black woman who is elected by her people to speak the truth. Asterisk, by the end of the segment, her words had already begun to ripple through social media and newsrooms. Analysts who had initially thought she'd issue a mild rebuke were revising their coverage. Viewers were replaying the clip. And perhaps most importantly, Crockett had forced a conversation that many tried to avoid. The cost of silence in the face of overt disrespect? Asterisk, in taking on Trump so directly? Jasmine Crockett didn't just respond to his post, she exposed the broader failure of accountability that allowed him to thrive. Jasmine Crockett sat upright in her chair, eyes sharp but posture composed, as she faced the live television audience. The clip of Donald Trump's post attacking her had already gone viral that morning, plastered across timelines with headlines that teetered between outrage and disbelief. What stood out wasn't just the insult itself, it was the calculated tone. The words he chose were deliberate. He didn't call her wrong, he didn't debate her policy. He went for the stereotype, the trope, the low-hanging fruit, the angry, black woman. Asterisk, Crockett was all too familiar with that label. It wasn't new. It was the kind of lazy shorthand often weaponized against women who dared to speak truth to power, especially black women. Trump, she knew, wasn't trying to argue with her. He was trying to discredit her, dehumanize her, reduce her to an archetype. Asterisk, but what he didn't understand was that she saw it coming, and she was ready. Asterisk, when asked about the post during the interview, she didn't dodge. She looked straight into the camera, voice calm and even, and said, "Let's talk about the stereotype. He wants to call me angry. Well, guess what? He's right. I am angry, but not the way he wants you to believe." Asterisk, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean into theatrics. She just listed facts, one by one, like bricks being laid for a foundation. Asterisk, I'm angry that women's reproductive rights are being stripped away. I'm angry that gun violence is the #1 killer of children in this country. I'm angry that people like Donald Trump, who incite violence and spread lies about elections, are still being normalized as political leaders. Asterisk, with each sentence, she pulled the audience closer, not through volume, but through clarity. She didn't deny her anger. She redefined it. Trump wanted the world to see her as emotional and unhinged. What she gave them instead was righteous fury, grounded in policy and principle. Asterisk, she leaned in slightly, eyes steady. See, Donald Trump wants you to think that my anger is a flaw, that it makes me irrational. But I ask you, what kind of woman wouldn't be angry in this America? What kind of congresswoman would see her people suffering and not feel something? Asterisk, that rhetorical shift was powerful. She took Trump's caricature of her and dismantled it. Live, in real time. What could have been a moment of defensive explanation became a lesson in reclaiming narrative. Asterisk, she didn't just defend herself. She made it about something bigger. Asterisk, he doesn't want to talk about why I challenge him because that would require honesty, she said. I challenge him because I believe in democracy. I challenge him because I don't think a man who calls white supremacists very fine people deserves to lead a diverse nation. I challenge him because truth matters, and he's allergic to it. Asterisk, there was no grin, no applause line. Just a slow burn of conviction that couldn't be shaken. Asterisk, and then she turned the tables completely. Asterisk, you know what else I'm angry about? I'm angry that this is still the playbook, that in 2025, we still have men in power using the same tired racist stereotypes to try and silence women like me. Donald Trump's not original, he's just loud. Asterisk, it was a direct shot, but delivered. Without venom, that's what made it land so hard. She wasn't reacting emotionally. She was breaking down a system, showing the audience how it worked, piece by piece. Asterisk, what she did in that moment wasn't just about Trump. It was about every woman who'd ever been told to calm down when speaking passionately. Every black woman labeled aggressive for standing her ground. Every voice dismissed as too loud, too bold, too much, and she didn't just leave it there. When he posts things like that, she said, it's not just about me. It's a message to every woman of color in public service. Stay in your place. Be quiet. Be small. But I refused to play along. I didn't run for office to be liked by Donald Trump. I ran to fight for my district, and I will not shrink to make insecure men comfortable. Asterisk, it was subtle, but devastating. In a matter of minutes, she turned a personal attack into a national moment of awareness, not through outrage, but through poise. Not through yelling, but by showing that earned anger is not weakness. Asterisk, it's strength. The moment Jasmine Crockett sat down on set, she knew the narrative had to shift. Trump's outrageous post targeting her had already taken over the news cycle, not because it had any substance but because it was dripping with insult, ignorance, and calculated provocation. It was textbook Donald Trump. Take a black woman in power, reduce her to a caricature, and rile up a base more interested in outrage than facts. But Crockett wasn't about to let the headlines stay fixated on the attack. She had a different plan, one that didn't involve fighting Trump on his turf, but instead exposing the reason behind his outburst. Asterisk, as the host pivoted to a broader policy discussion, she interrupted gently but firmly. Before we get into the policy, she said, let's just take a minute and ask why. Is he really mad? Asterisk, that was the turn. That was when she stopped being the victim of Trump's tirade and became the prosecutor of his intent. Asterisk, he's not upset because I did something unethical. He's not angry because I lied, or twisted facts, or smeared someone's reputation, she said. He's furious because I told the truth about him, about January 6th. About the threat he poses to this country. Asterisk, it wasn't speculation. Crockett had been one of the most vocal critics of Trump's post-presidency behavior, especially his role in the insurrection and ongoing efforts to delegitimize democracy. During hearings, interviews, and floor speeches, she had repeatedly called him out, not with empty rhetoric, but with hard facts and sharp questions. And every time she did, she drew more attention, more support, more momentum. Asterisk, that's what this is really about, she said, holding her composure. He's trying to make noise to cover the truth. He doesn't want Americans focused on the dozens of felony charges he's facing, or the millions in hush money payments, or the fact that he openly tried to subvert an election. So what does he do? He picks a fight. He makes it personal. Asterisk, she paused for a moment, then added, he makes me the headline, hoping you'll forget he is the problem. Asterisk, that line hit like a lightning bolt, because she was right. For years, Trump had mastered the art of distraction, steering media attention away from his own chaos by creating controversy somewhere else. But Crockett wasn't just pointing out the pattern, she was unraveling it in front of millions of viewers. Asterisk, he didn't just come after me randomly. I had just voted against one of his loyalists being appointed to a federal committee. I had just spoken out against the effort to rewrite the history of January 6th. He saw that, and instead of engaging in debate, he did what cowards do. He attacked me personally. Asterisk, there was no bitterness in her tone, just a matter-of-factness that made it even more effective. Asterisk, Crockett understood that, to win the moment, she had to rise above the noise without ignoring it. She wasn't giving Trump a pass, but she also wasn't letting him dominate the conversation. She was using the attack to bring attention back to what mattered, why he felt the need to attack in the first place. Asterisk, when you threaten his narrative, she said, he lashes out. That's been his playbook from the start. whether it's judges, prosecutors, journalists, or women in Congress. If you challenge his authority, he tries to humiliate you. Asterisk. Then she leaned in slightly. But here's what he doesn't get. We're not afraid of him, not anymore. Asterisk. That wasn't just a personal declaration. It was a political one. Trump had long thrived on the idea that he could bully his way through opposition, that fear would silence his critics. But Crockett's calm dismantling of his tactics showed a shift. It wasn't just about her being unshaken, it was about a broader culture that no longer tiptoed around his behavior. Asterisk. And just as quickly as she had taken control of the segment, she widened the lens again. Asterisk. This isn't about me and Donald Trump, she said. It's about power. It's about who gets to speak and who gets to be heard. It's about whether we let bullies dictate the terms of our democracy. Asterisk. She used that moment not to complain, not to gloat, but to clarify. Trump's post, she explained, wasn't a spontaneous insult. It was a calculated reaction to losing control. Because every time someone like Jasmine Crockett calls him out, it chips away at the illusion he works so hard to maintain. That he's untouchable. Asterisk. But Crockett wasn't just surviving the moment. She was flipping it entirely, taking a cheap insult from a former president and transforming it into a national wake-up call. Not just about him, but about what kind of country we're willing to accept. Jasmine Crockett didn't just speak for herself that day. She spoke for an entire generation that had grown up watching people like her pushed to the sidelines. After reading Donald Trump's post on live television and calmly dismantling its cruelty, she knew her work wasn't finished. It wasn't enough to clap back or expose his pattern of demeaning women of color. She needed to use the moment for something bigger, something enduring. And so, in a shift so subtle that viewers almost didn't realize it at first, she turned directly to the camera and made it personal. Asterisk. To every young black girl watching, this, she said, voice steady, eyes unblinking, when they come for you, don't shrink, stand taller. Asterisk. There were no theatrics, no dramatic lighting, just a statement so direct and unapologetic that it rang louder than any insult Donald Trump could ever type. Crockett wasn't just reacting anymore, she was leading. And this time, she wasn't speaking to politicians or pundits. She was speaking to every girl who had ever been told she was too much, too loud, too opinionated, too ambitious, too angry. Asterisk. Trump's post had tried to paint her as a problem, as someone unworthy of respect, as a stereotype instead of a person, and instead of stooping to his level, Crockett turned the attack into a call to action. He thinks by mocking me, he's going to shut me up, she said earlier in the interview. But all he's really done is give me the microphone, and she used that microphone with intention. She described the countless messages she received, from young women who had seen her stand up in congressional hearings, who watched her challenge power without raising her voice, girls from Houston, Detroit, Atlanta, college students, teenagers, first-year law students. They didn't reach out because she made headlines, they reached out because she made them feel seen. And now, she was talking directly to them. Asterisk. This isn't just about Donald Trump being offensive, she said. It's about a system that tries to condition us to stay quiet, to play it safe, to wait our turn. But if you're waiting for permission to be powerful, you'll never get it. You have to take it. Asterisk. It was powerful precisely because it wasn't rehearsed. Her voice didn't waver. Her message didn't need approval. She was done asking. Asterisk. She didn't mention Trump again by name in that part of the segment, but the context hung in the air. Everyone watching understood who she was referring to, the man who had tried to reduce her to a meme, who had failed, and who now found himself on the wrong side of history, watching a younger, sharper, more composed voice rewrite the script. In real time, Asterisk. And Crockett didn't make it about herself. She knew what it meant for people to see someone like her on TV, unbothered, unshaken, and fully in control. That alone was a statement. But what made it more powerful was that she invited others to step into that space, too. Asterisk. I'm not special, she said. I just stopped apologizing for taking up space. Asterisk. In just a few words, she cracked the ceiling wide open for those watching. She wasn't playing the hero. She was handing the baton. The social media reaction was instantaneous, not just from fellow lawmakers and commentators, but from everyday women who finally saw their own frustrations articulated without being diluted. And perhaps more importantly, young girls saw a roadmap how to respond when power comes for you. When the loudest man in the room tries to shrink you down to nothing. Asterisk. Crockett's message wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about visibility, about transformation, about telling people like Trump, through grace and grit, you don't get to define me, and you don't get to define anyone like me ever again. Asterisk. Her final words in that interview weren't flashy, but they resonated. She looked into the camera, composed as ever, and simply said, you belong. Don't forget that. Not even for a second. Asterisk. And just like that, the insult was buried on, something more powerful was born. A narrative not of victimhood, but of undeniable strength. A refusal to be minimized. A reminder that every time someone like Trump tries to knock, A woman down, she doesn't just rise, she brings others with her. What Jasmine Crockett did on that broadcast was more than a response, it was a redefinition. She didn't just react to Donald Trump's cruel post. She elevated the moment into something far more significant. In a political landscape saturated with noise, drama, and performative outrage, she chose clarity, control, and conviction. She refused to play by the rules that Trump has imposed on so many others, the rules that say you either scream louder than him or get drowned out. Instead, she found a third way. Speak the truth, and speak it like you mean it. Asterisk, in doing so, she exposed more than just one man's insecurities. She laid bare the entire machinery that has enabled figures like him to maintain power through division, mockery, and fear. Her composure made his cruelty look even smaller. Her intelligence made his insults seem even more hollow, and her refusal to back down without ever lowering herself to his level. Creed, a model for political courage that resonated far beyond the walls of Congress. Asterisk, but what made her response truly unforgettable was that it wasn't just about defending herself. She turned the spotlight outward toward the millions of women, especially women of color, who have been targeted, disrespected, or dismissed simply for being confident, outspoken, or unafraid. She made them feel seen, heard, validated, and she gave them language to confront injustice, not with rage alone, but with power sharpened by purpose. Asterisk, Crockett's approach dismantled the very tools Trump uses to control narratives. He thrives when opponents take his bait, lose their footing, and descend into chaos. But she didn't take that bait. She kept the focus where it belonged, not on his provocations, but on the system that allows those provocations to flourish. She didn't reduce him to a punchline or give him a catchy nickname. She gave him something he's not used to facing: dignity and defiance. Asterisk, in many ways, her message was bigger than politics. It was about the moral obligation to push back against indecency, no matter where it comes from, to speak when it's easier, to stay silent, to lead even when others choose to follow fear. Asterisk, Donald Trump may have intended to humiliate her, to intimidate her, to knock her off balance, but what he ended up doing was giving Jasmine Crockett a bigger platform, and she used it to tell the country exactly who he is, exactly what she stands for, and exactly where the line needs to be drawn. Asterisk, and that's how real leadership looks. Not in shouting matches, not in retaliation, but in the quiet, unshakable refusal to let ignorance go unchallenged. She didn't just win the moment, she